Okay, so in this video we are going to do the rear rotors and brake pads and a brake fluid flush on my 2000 Disco V8 4-liter. Hoping it's a pretty straightforward job. It should be. I'm going to walk you through my setup here in the garage and then the tools I have, and then record the job, and we'll see how it goes. So let's start with the tools. All right, here's what we got for tools. Obviously, we'll start with the parts. Replacement rotors. I've got two rear rotors here. They are from what appears to be a good bit thinner, well, I guess less surface area than the front rotors. Rear brake pads. Interesting, they have these little sort of retaining arm springs here on the top instead of like a traditional pad, which has a little retaining clips on the sides. Got some DOT4 brake fluid, synthetic. From what I understood, any decent synthetic DOT4 brake fluid should do the job. For tools, I got my big old persuader here just to get the pistons pressed back, because I imagine those pistons in the caliper pistons probably all the way out, so I'm going to have to push them back to make room for the new pad thickness. Socket or a ratchet, some sockets to get caliper bolts and that sort of stuff off. Now for the lug nuts, I had seen on Facebook and other places some debate about whether it was a 27 mil or a 28 mil. I went out and bought a 27 mil. It was too small. I bought a 1 1/16 inch socket. It was too small, but the 1 1/8 appears to be a winner. So let me show you here. So we get that bad boy on there, and yeah, she's a little loose, but she hangs on. That might just be the play and the cover for the lug itself. Now, you do not need to remove the cover for the lug. It stays on, even though it sort of has a little bit of love or a little bit of give to it on some of these. I can actually spin them, like that one right there. That one's moving pretty good. You don't need to remove the cover for the lugs, so that's that. Let's talk a little bit about the garage setup. So like I said, I'm in my single car garage. My double's over there. Here's my jack from the Hazard of Fart. I've had this guy for a while. It's done me well. Don't anticipate too many issues. I got a little piece of cut over or cut off 2x4 that I'll probably put on the pedestal there. I plan to just jack it up from the rear diff and then put stands on the axle or some lift points on each side here. There's my little tool cart with all the pads and parts and tools. And there's my baby swamp cooler because it is freaking hot here in Phoenix, Arizona. So that's my setup. I'm going to tackle this guy first. I'll get it on camera, and then we'll see how this job goes. All right, let's bust some lugs. Oh, she was on there. There we go. Come on. So, had a bit of an issue so far. Socket for the lugs. The lugs. You can see the little cap here got pretty mangled, and I had an interesting time getting rid of it. And if it happens again, I will actually show you the technique that I use. It's very, very, well, it's very delicate, we'll say. Okay, happened again. Let me put one back in. Now obviously I have to go through and clean up these lugs and the studs and all that. This one didn't get stuck as bad as the first one. There's still some separation there, but let me show you how I remedy this situation. All right, watch my toes here. She's free. Let me go find that lug. Okay, this one also got mangled up a little bit. I've seen that a lot of people actually just replace these lugs, but I don't mind this. I think once I clean them up, they'll be fine. So, lugs are loose on this side. Let's go ahead and jack this puppy up and get that wheel off, and you guys can see the damage. All right, she's in the air, ever so slightly. All right, these lugs are loose already. They should spin right out. Well, for the most part. Let me grab mine. I don't know if you guys can see this. I am just pouring sweat. It's so freaking hot. I don't know why people live here. I don't know why I live here. And you know what's crazy? While we're sitting there getting these lug nuts out, I think people used to come here because the cost of living was so good and the real estate prices were so low, but man, it is wild now. That on top of the crazy mortgage rates. I think, God, I own my home already. Well, you know, the bank owns it, but at least I'm not renting is what I mean. Because I don't think there's any way I could do it now. In the house that I'm in, there's no way I could afford it. And I only bought this thing, 3 years ago now. All right, let's get this guy off and see how we're doing here. So as you can see, this is not a, well, it's not what you want to see. This rotor's grooved to hell. Oh, it's terrible. There's so many different ridges in here. A hub being rusty is not surprising, especially for an older vehicle. I'll clean that up. I might even paint the thing at some point. A lot of rust above, well, not rust, a lot of crud and gunk to clean up down here. But like I said before, really, really thankful and so surprised at actually how rust free the vehicle is. So give me a second, I'll get my tools prepped, and then we'll get this caliper taken off and take a look at these pads. Okay, so what we have here are two 12mm bolts holding this caliper in. Should be able to release these guys, and then without too much effort, take this caliper off, get access to the pads, and then can't forget we're going to do the rotors too. So once I get the caliper off, and move on to the next step here. I also have a little 12mm wrench just in case, and a little 12mm ratcheting wrench just to make this a little bit easier on myself. Alrighty, let's see which one we got here. Now, I have not sprayed these at all. I am so surprised at how easily that got broken. Thank you very much. Oh, all right. Those came right off. That is quite surprising. The threads don't look so shit on them that I would replace them actually. I did for a moment. I'm going to soak these in some brake clean. In fact, I'm going to soak most of this in some brake clean and then wire wheel it on the drill. So let's get this caliper off and see what we look like. Alright. Okay, wow, that was painless. Wow, that is surprising. Guys, let me show you. What the heck? Look at the life on those pads. That is unbelievable. Huh. Now on the driver's side, I could actually see the shim hitting the rotor. This is surprising. I mean, these pads look like shit. They're flaking off and they're pretty glazed over, but well, it's kind of impressive. And I think they're both supposed to have this little retaining spring here. Let's get the other pads for comparison. Okay, so these are the OG rear pads. A ton of material left on these things. I'm very surprised. They are so badly grooved because of the rotor. Man, they were really badly grooved, and they look to be pretty glazed over. Now, this one seems to be missing that retaining spring. Here are the factory pads. You can see they got a little shim on the back, which the OG pads used to have one, it looked like, maybe. But the thickness is very comparable. I mean, I almost want to say there's more thickness on the old pad than there are on the new pads, which is wild. But they definitely weren't stopping this thing. So I guess the issue is mostly with the rotor. I'm still going to replace them because these are just a higher quality of pads and they're not glazed and grooved like these are. I'll just save these just in case. I have no idea. Let's take a look at this caliper. So the boot on the caliper is actually in decent condition. It's not torn or ripped. This caliper just looks like shit, but I think I can clean this up pretty nice with the wire wheel and keep it serviceable. I know I'm going to end up redoing these brake lines, especially once I do the lift, because I don't think these brake lines will be long enough. I really wish I had the brake lines to do right now, but I just didn't order them. So that's probably a mistake. I probably should have ordered them ahead of time. I'll do them at another point. But I'm going to go ahead and, well, actually that's right. We're going to end up redoing this rotor. So let me get this caliper bracket off, which is just a couple of bolts in the back of it, and then we'll have access to this caliper, which should be a good time because I'm going to bet you that thing is stuck on there pretty good. So give me just a sec. Alright, the two caliper mounting brackets are sitting back here, easy access to them. 13 mil, so the caliper bolts themselves were 12s. Oh, I haven't pulled these caliper pins out. I still need to do that so I can clean them off. But 13 mil for these caliper bracket mounting bolts. And I'm going to cheat a little bit on this one. That's what I was afraid of. I'm gonna have to get into this. Let's see if we can do this without banging our shit up too much. Alright. Yeah, she was definitely stuck on there a good bit. Okay. All right, that wasn't too bad actually. seen guys have to jump on those things with a pretty long extension on a breaker bar to get these out. Ooh, they feel terrible though. So obviously the pads had been worked on not too long ago. I mean, to have the bolts broke on the caliper bolts pretty easily. These definitely took some more persuasion. These got to get cleaned up. They're pretty nasty. Looks like they had a little bit of blue Loctite on these too, so gotta make sure I reapply that Loctite on these. And there we are. Yeah, that had been on there for quite a while. Nice and shiny here, gunky everywhere else. So this should be pretty easy work on the wire wheel. You know, the boots on these guide pins are not like gone, which is surprising. Wow! There's even a little bit of grease on the guide pins. I'll tell you what, this thing is surprising. Yank that off. So these just pop them right off. Yeah, I mean, it's not even a bad grease job either. Usually you either see these completely dry or you know, some overly zealous greaser just coated these things in grease. And what will happen is if you put like grease on the top of the guide pin, you can't get the proper depth when you put it back in, so the caliper actually never slides correctly. So a very light amount of grease on these actually. This is one of those instances where less is actually more. So we'll get these cleaned up, and when we put it back together, I'll show you what I mean. But this is pretty good, not bad. I'm happy with this. All right, let's see about getting this rotor off. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's supposed to be a flathead retaining screw right here. That is not there. Not integral, but you know, should be there. Pretty positive that's what it is. I mean, I can see that it's threaded. I imagine when I take off the other rotors, I'll see hopefully I'll see one of these. But we'll see. Gosh, this rotor is just in terrible, terrible shape. Oh. All right, let's see about getting it off. Now I could just hit it. Probably don't even need to use a dead blow hammer. Let me get something with a little bit more finesse. That's what I'm talking about. And you know what's crazy so far is this brake job is already miles easier than the brake job I did on my wife's Mercedes 2020 GLE 350. Those calipers were such a pain in the ass to get off. They shouldn't be, just 2 bolts again. But the pads were sticking to the calipers because I don't know what the heck they used. It definitely wasn't grease. It must have been some kind of adhesive straight from the factory. And so the caliper wouldn't let go because it was holding on to the pads. I had to beat the crap out of them with this to finally release. So I'm happy with this so far. Let's see. No, making progress. I don't have a ton of. I definitely did something there. Come on, girl. Oh! There she is. Wow, that hub looks beat to shit. Okay. Rotors are off. Rotors off, calipers off, pads are off. Now it's time to basically just clean this bad boy up. Hit it with a ton of WD-40. I don't have any anything else. And then use brake grease on the slide pins, the arms of the pads, a little bit on the rear shim of the pad. And that's probably it. I'll walk you through how I'm going to lube everything up. First order of business though is just let's clean this thing. A lot of brake fluid, or a lot of brake clean, and a wire wheel. A liberal amount of brake clean. And I'm willing to bet this will actually look pretty sticky once I hit it with the wire wheel. Okay, this is going to get a little bit messy. I also have a brush, I will use that, but this should do the majority of the work for me. Alright, a little 220 grit sandpaper. Let's just see what we can do, see if we can make a dent anywhere. Okay, let's get her back together. So, basically the reverse operation. Where's the hole for this? Alright, that's a good sign. Turn it in nice and easily. So rear pad time. Now this is where we're going to talk about lubricating and what to look for here. So when you're doing brakes, you want to lubricate any of the moving parts, okay? So typically that's going to be around the ears of the pad. So right here, just a little bit of grease, you know, because sometimes the pads will slide in and out, especially as they're getting pushed by the piston as they start to wear. You could put a very tiny amount on the back of the shim if you want to, very, very small amount. You're going to want to put some in the caliper bracket where the pads sit. Go ahead and show you here. See right here where the pads are going to sit, you know, a little bit of grease there is not the worst thing in the world. All right, so they're going to sit in there just like that, a little bit of grease on these little rails. I'll probably put just a very small amount around this spring since it's a moving piece. Definitely the guides on the caliper itself, which I'll show you here in just a moment. And that's it. Don't go crazy with the grease. And no matter what you do, do not put grease on your rotor. Okay, don't do that. That'll be a bad time. Definitely don't put grease on the face of the pad, you know, on the wear side of the pad. So let's get to it. So here's my little grease stick. I'm just gonna barely get some onto this little arm, and I'm done. That's even more than enough. Okay. Barely get some onto that arm, and that's it. And maybe I'll put a little bit of here just on this little spring since I see that it rotates a little bit. I don't even think that needs it. Okay, so now that guy's ready to go on. If you want to put some on the back of the shim, just a super light amount. Okay, right there, not much. You don't need a ton. And some people will say on the back of the shim, you really don't need any. So that one's I'm going to leave up to you. And because I put so much grease on the arms on these, I'm not even going to grease the rails on that side. Plus it's a little pain in the ass, so I'll put just a tiny amount of grease right here on this rail, a tiny amount of grease right there on that rail, and that's it. I'm not trying to get a ton on there. Tiny amount on the arm, the ear, whatever you want to call it. There you go. Now I'm going to make sure that I did not get any on the pad itself. If you do, you take a little bit of sandpaper, a little bit of brake clean, scrub that bad boy off. And that's it. Okay. These have definitely seen better days, but the boots on the guide pin are not completely shot. They're not torn. No cracks in them, but yeah, they definitely have seen better days. So I'm going to be gentle with these as I clean them up, and see if I can't rejuvenate them just a little bit. I'm happy with that. Okay, now I'm going to wipe the grease off of this one and then show you. And actually, I would have been fine just throwing that back in just the way it was. But it was not in bad shape. You know, you want to check the pliability of this boot. Make sure that it can, you know, collapse and expand. And then it's not torn anywhere else. You're going to be losing that grease. But this looks good. So, again, I'm going to take my brake grease. You're not going to want to apply any to the tip of the guide pin. Again, if you do that, you're going to reduce the space in there that it can travel. Right, and this thing needs to be able to travel for full function of the brake system. So just a little bit on the sides, okay? That's it. I'm happy with that. That's even a good bit right there. You don't need a ton, because as this, you know, as you push it in and out, it's going to disperse or spread some of that grease around. Okay, let's say you need to, let's see that your caliper won't go back on because now you got too much thickness here with the new pads, okay? So what you need to do is you need to compress the piston here in this caliper. Best way to do that is you take your old pads or a shim or something, put that bad boy on there, you get yourself a C-clamp, and you compress. There we go. Done. Now I have a ton of room to actually push it all the way back in. Okay, and that goes on just like that. Okay, that's a brake job done. Put that wheel on and get it back down the ground. So what I find to be helpful is if you don't have a, you know, if you're not like lifted, I sort of get my legs and hold the wheel like this with my shins, and then it's easier for me to line up lug nuts. And then once you get like one good one started, it helps to sort of center the rest of the nuts on the studs here. Okay, time to get it back on the ground. Pressure off the jack stand. All right, so job well done. Got a new rotor on there. Got new pads on there. Definitely needed new rotors. Actually, surprisingly, did not need new pads. I was very, very surprised about that. On this side, at least. I got to see what's going on the other side. Basic order of operations. This is not different from any other brake job. Loosen your lugs. Jack the vehicle up. Put it on the stand. Take your lugs off. Take your wheel off. You got two, for this truck, two 12 millimeter caliper bolts holding the caliper on. You yank that bad boy off, came out without a fuss. You have two 13 mil bolts holding the caliper bracket on. Also came out with relatively little fuss. That takes off your caliper, the caliper bracket. You give that rotor a few good taps, because most of them do get seized on there, whether it's a new car or an old car. You give it a few good taps, rock it back and forth, you fight with it. You do not need to take your axle nut off, as I discovered. I knew better, I don't know why. And then you put that bad boy back together in reverse operation, making sure you grease your pads and your hardware accordingly. So that's it. Thanks for sticking around. Like I said, I'll have that proper how-to video on the other side done in just a little bit here. Thanks.